Right, bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup d'être présent pour la troisième journée de votre French Masterclass. So thank you everyone for being here today. Day 3 is about one reliable method to set up your language goals. This is one that I particularly like for a lot of reasons, which I'm sure I'll be talking a little bit more about, but essentially, I do not see the point of having a huge enthusiasm for learning a foreign language, regardless of the level that you want to be at, to then learn all about great strategies to get yourself going, to then not have a plan about where you actually want to go. So on day 1, we looked at 2 really important strategies to help you kickstart your brain into either learning French or improving your French skills by, adapting better strategies. On day 2, we went a little bit further on talking about resources and the whole blended learning. I was going to say attitude. It's not an attitude, it's a methodology to help you that little bit further. So today, it's all about setting language goals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my background again, because to me, it is so relevant to most of the content in this masterclass. So, as you know, when I started, I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the knowledge. So, quite frankly, I went out there, I bought books, whatever books the BBC was coming out with, or I went into charity shops. So for those of you who live in the UK, you'll know exactly what I mean. They are full of books that people are getting rid of. So that was my Saturday afternoon leisurely activity. And everything or anything that I could find, any methodology, any verb book, any grammar book, I would just buy it. And the truth is that when you follow a traditional French course or a textbook course, you are following someone else's curriculum. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's normally full of brilliant content, but it's not identifying your goals, what you need and what you want to learn. So it is okay to kind of go, okay, unit 1, we're going to do that. Unit 2, we're going to do that. But actually, when you go over all these resources, when you revise what you've learned, you then have another job of picking out what's important to you. If you never want to buy a property in France, learning all the bits around the dining room may not be particularly interesting or relevant. So the idea with today's masterclass is that you want to decide what you want to focus on in terms of what you want to learn, and more broadly, the knowledge that you want to have acquired by the time you may decide to stop learning French and just practice it regularly or live on what you've got. We all know that, learning a foreign language is a journey. And here at the Academy, we really, really want to instill in our learners that it is all about the journey. If you want that journey, however, to be enjoyable and enriching and rewarding, you need to know where you're going. Whether you've decided to start next month, and you give yourself 1, 2, 3, 10 years to learn the language, or whether you've decided that it's just simply going to be part of your lifestyle, so it's something that you might do forever. Regardless, you need to understand where you're going. You need some sort of roadmap. Otherwise, it's unlikely that you will be discouraged at some point. Let's face it, I would be lying if I was saying to you that learning a foreign language is always kind of flawless and easy, because it isn't. Sometimes you do very well, sometimes you plateau, sometimes you feel that you're not really improving. It's just part of the process. But when you have an end goal, or when you have a journey in mind, or when you have a roadmap of where you're going, then even when it gets a little challenging, it's still worth it because you know where you're going. Now, I did warn you on day one that I love analogies. So there is one for you. And I see Laura is smiling because I use that one a lot because it's my favorite. So I love hiking in the mountains. So I come from Jura, so kind of low to medium mountains. I love skiing. I love when I'm in Jura, I do what do you call it, Nordic walking. And when I go in the Alps, I just go and walk in the mountains with my Labrador for hours. The thing is this, when I take on a path and I am going, at the top of a skiing piece, so it's really quite steep in the summer, it's enjoyable. It is something that I want to do. I know that it's going to get hard at some point, but I know when I get to the top, I feel really good. Whilst I'm walking up, sometimes I'm finding it really quite challenging and I get really tired and I really need to push through, not to give up. Sometimes I think it's quite a leisurely walk. There's a bit of a flat bit and it is quite nice. There's a bit of a breeze and this is all really lovely. Sometimes this happened to me last time I went hiking in the Alps. I ended up in a big field with lots of wild cows. And, I was a bit like, ooh, are they friendly? Are they not? Can my Labrador go and chat to them and play with them? Or are they going to be a little bit aggressive? I wasn't really sure. If I hadn't known where I was going on that mountain, I would have probably gone back down. I probably would not have risked going through the entire herd. But I knew where I was going because there was a clear path and it was also indicated where I needed to go. So I knew it was safe because there was no way they would let people cross this farm if this wasn't safe, where, a lot of people go there, a lot of tourists. And then I got to the top and then I had a little rest. And then I felt really happy with myself. And then I thought, ooh, there's another part there. So shall I just go home for today or can I push for another hour or so? The reason why I'm telling you all of this is, to me going up my mountain is a little bit like you learning or improving your French. This is something that you want to do. That sometimes it's going to be really entertaining and it's going to be fairly easy and you're going to breathe through. Sometimes it's going to be really challenging and you're going to really doubt your ability to either learn the language or go to the next level or even be bilingual one day. Sometimes some unexpected things are going to cross your path. And then at some point, you will have reached a level where you're going to think, all right, is this good for me? Shall I go a little further or not? This is exactly like learning a foreign language. But the truth is that it is super enjoyable and you want to be there. No one forces me to climb up that mountain with my dog. This is something that I really love doing. I find it relaxing. It's good for my health. It pushes some of my boundaries. I probably wouldn't do it every day. That wouldn't be my work. But as a serious hobby is something that I absolutely adore doing. And I recognize a lot of our learners at the academy in this. That's why I always use this analogy. So with this in mind, Laura and I today really want to help work through those language goals. So there are 3 pillars that you really need to look at. The first one is looking at the different levels. Let me share my screen. So I think Laura wants to share a document. Is that okay, Laura? Has that allowed you to, yeah? Okay, so number one, let me give you the 3 pillars and then we'll work through them. So number one is looking at the different levels of proficiency when you are learning a foreign language. Number 2, within those levels is to look at the skills that you want to acquire, the communicative skills, and we'll look at those later. And number 3 is to have that roadmap that I like to talk about. 1, 2, 3, level, skills, roadmap. So if we look at the level, language schools across the world will have maybe a slightly different opinion on this, but as far as we are concerned, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages is our Bible. It's an extremely thorough scheme of work, so we can look at all the different skills that language learners need to have acquired in order to be proficient in that language. I think that the different communicative skills and the different steps are very well worked on and structured and outlined. So this is what we will be working on. So you basically have 3 different levels, A, B, C, very simple. A1 and A2, where you are a basic user. B1 and B2, when you become an independent learner. And C1 and C2, this is when you are reaching fluency. So can I ask you now, Laura, to show us the slightly more detailed version of the CEFR, please?
Absolutely. So you will all have received a document from Natalie yesterday by email, which is a very, very complete guide to this, where we have all of the different levels, so A1, A2, etc., all broken down into a lot, broken down into lots and lots of different things that you can really look at. What we're going to show you today is just kind of the global idea of the levels, so you can get more of an idea of what it is. So if we have a look, so we have the different levels going from A1, A2, which are considered basic levels, B1, B2, which is where you are more independent, and then C1, C2, where you are becoming more proficient. To know that C2 is more reflective of native speaker ability, which means that C2 is an extremely good level. Not everybody will get to a C2 level, and it's not necessarily the goal of everyone to get to a C2 level as well. If your goal really is to get to being a very independent user where you can get by in lots of situations in French, then a B2 is going to be the kind of area that you're looking at. C1, C2 is very much when you're working in technical domains in English or in the language, for example, it would be French for you, and very, very specific specialized language often. Remember, as a native speaker as well, you don't necessarily know every single word in the language. Sometimes when we go to technical domains, we don't know what, you don't know certain words as well, you don't know certain expressions. So we have to remember when we're looking at this, that the goal, firstly, is never 100%. 100% doesn't exist. That's not something that we can achieve for a language. So let's have a look then at the different steps. Let's start to begin with the basic A1, A2. As you can see, A1 is very much sort of the breakthrough stage. This is kind of where a lot of people come to us. They say, I've done a lot of time on the apps, things like that. A1 stage is very simple. You can understand very simple expressions. You can give very simple expressions. For example, you can go into a cafe in France and you can ask for your coffee, and you can do the very routine, thank you, merci, like that. If the server tries to speak to you in a little bit more detail about something else, maybe you're not going to understand. So A1 is very much using very basic interaction. This is kind of where you really can go and you can do very routine tasks that you've practiced a lot, but you can't necessarily speak with very much spontaneity. Or you can read very basic sentences. For example, maybe you can manage just about to read a train timetable, things where it's very, where you can really imagine what it's going to say, so we can really predict already the kind of language it's going to have. So A1 is very that basic, just kind of very simple getting by. A2 suddenly is where you can actually start to really string your sentences together. So you're going to be able to actually have a little bit more of an interaction, for example, with your waiter when you arrive in the cafe. However, again, it's going to remain very basic. It's going to stay around topics that you are familiar with. So very much interactions, things that you can do yourself, things that you can already predict how the interaction is going to go, very routine sequences, for example. You can explain a little bit about yourself. You can do a basic presentation. But again, as soon as the interaction goes a little bit off your script of what you thought was going to happen, maybe you get a little bit stuck. You aren't very good with the spontaneity at this point. So A1, A2 really are kind of the basics. If your goal is just to be able to go on holiday and order in a restaurant and be able to do the very basic functional interactions, A2 is kind of where you're going to be. The jump between A2 and B1 is where things get a little bit bigger. B1, we're really starting to get a lot more spontaneity, and you're going to be able to have a lot wider vocabulary. This means you're going to be able to understand a lot more of different texts and a lot more of different conversations. So for example, we have producing texts which are on topics of familiar interest. So for example, you can read or you can write texts that are about your hobbies, about things that are particular to you, maybe about your workplace. Here is also where we can start to really give insight as to what we're thinking. So talking about our opinions, our beliefs, things like that. So B1 is really where we're beginning to be able to express ourselves and show our personality a little bit more. Really is where we can start to actually become who we are and show who we are in the language. Afterwards, B1, and then we get to B2. This really is the level where you are a very proficient, a very intermediate user, meaning that you are able to cope with everyday situations. You can understand the news when you read it. You can understand different magazines or YouTube videos or things that are of interest to you. You probably understand TV shows. If maybe you need subtitles, you might need to look up every now and then a word. But B2 is a very good level. If you would like to go and study, well, if maybe not quite for you, but if someone wants to go and study in another country, usually they ask for a very, sort of the top level of B2 is where you need to be. So at this point, you can get by in a foreign country, you can talk about things that are of interest to you, you can be a lot more varied in your sentence structure, and you can really get by very, very well. As I said, this is B2, kind of the level where a lot of people will be expecting to, or a lot of people want to get, because it means that you can be independent in your language skills. You can cope with situations that maybe you weren't necessarily prepared for. So for example, if your car breaks down and you need to call somebody, or if you have to make a doctor's appointment that you weren't expecting, something like that. Once we pass the B2 level and we get to C1, C2, this is very, very good high level. This means that you are a very, very proficient user. It means that you are able to cope with technical situations as well. And for example, you'll be able to cope with academic studies in the language. You'll be able to cope with business studies in the language, or working in a company, something like that. So once we get to a C1, it is very, very much not exactly native. Perhaps there will still be a few little so let's say not very native like expressions in the language or terms or phrases. However, you are going to be at a very, very good level. So between B2 and C1, I just want to stress that there is quite a difference between the two. And it's not necessarily in everyone's objectives to get to a C1. And that's okay, because you can do very, very well in the language without being at a C1 level. So this is kind of where I really suggest you take time to look at the Common European Framework reference as well, and really see if there are any of the skills, which Natalie will come to in a minute, of that level that you want to get to. Once we get to C2, this is quite rare, I would say, in foreign language acquisition if you are learning from an adult stage. C2 means that you are effectively at a native speaker level. You can understand things just as well as a native speaker, just about, and you can do everything that you would like to do in a language. Obviously, as I said, we are always learning more. So I don't want you to think of C2 as like 100%, as I said, because that isn't something that is realistic for languages, because we're always adding more and more. But these are kind of the guidelines, the stages that we can go through when we're looking at our language development. So as I said, it is also really important to think about where you want to be as well as where you are. And I'll leave it back to Natalie to go through in a bit more detail.
Thank you very much, Laura. So I'm not particularly efficient with Zoom, so I think that if I do that, I'll be able to share another document. Bear with me, which would be here. Can everyone see this document? Yeah. Okay. So I really want to touch up on what Laura said. reaching a C1 or C2 level, whilst it is incredible, and if that's really what you want, I will 100% encourage you to do it. Don't think that this is the be all and end all, okay? It is an extremely challenging result to achieve, and it's not always necessary, okay? We have trained some of our students at that level. I'm thinking of a gentleman in particular who was Irish, lived here in the UK, and worked in the pharmaceutical industry. He was the European head of supply chain, and he was getting a job in Paris. He needed to have at least a C1 level, and that included an awful lot of technical stuff, which was obviously down to the industry that it was in. But what I want to say is that if you are looking to get by, feel comfortable in your skin when you are speaking French, knowing that you're not completely proficient, knowing that you're not completely independent, but actually there isn't anywhere in an everyday situation where you can be without pulling something out of the hat if something was to happen to you. That would be a level A2, for example. Of course, if you want to work in a French company, as Laura said, if you want to apply for university, then you need to look at more of a B1, B2. Most European countries used to ask for a B2 level to take the nationality test. It's gone down to B1 now for most of them, okay? And I would say that the main difference between B1 and B2 is one is more technical. So B1 means that you master all the different tenses and all the grammar very well. B2 means that you understand it, can utilize it, but in a more complex way. You are able to make sentences which are not only correct grammatically and all your verbs are spot on, but you are expressing yourself with a huge variety of sentence structure and vocabulary. That's the difference between the two. So it would be really interesting for you to take a moment and, for now, because it can change, decide the ideal level that you would like to reach as you either embark on your French language journey or continue along that journey. So the next thing that we want to talk to you about are the skills that you need to acquire within those levels. So when you look at learning a foreign language, we like to focus on 5 different skills: listening, reading, writing, spoken production, and spoken interaction. I very much like to emphasize on the last 2, because as a general rule, in most traditional courses, you hear that it's about speaking. Well, there's a real difference between spoken production and spoken interaction. When you have to speak to someone and explain something in a casual conversation or because you need help or advice, this is spoken production. How well can you express yourself? When you start to interact with someone and have a 2 or 3 or 10-way conversation, this is spoken interaction. And obviously that requires slightly different skills, okay? So another thing that I would really like you to think about is say, okay, so listening, reading, writing, spoken production, spoken interaction. Which skill would I ideally like to focus on? Because, you know, when you learn a foreign language, all the skills are going to be involved, all of them. But you can decide to focus on certain skills if you want to narrow your studies. So you could say, well, I tell you what, communication, oral communication for me is going to be a huge factor. So I may just focus on listening, spoken production, spoken interaction. You may think, well, actually, you know, I've been practicing French for a while. I go to France all the time. I live in France. For me, this is kind of okay. I want to take an exam. So I'm going to have to focus on the reading and writing skills. This, guys, is going to be really quite important when you decide to set up your language goals. The more focused you are on the skills that you want to focus on, the more you're going to progress. Because let me tell you, once you've started to be comfortable with certain skills, the other ones will kind of flow in naturally. This can sound a little bit, you know, of a simplified version, but I can guarantee that once you focus on certain skills, so for example, you know, yesterday some of you asked a question about bilingual children. Bilingual children will acquire all these skills naturally, apart from one, writing. Writing, they will need to learn. But the truth is that it will be much easier for them to learn it than other children who have not been exposed to the language. Reading, isn't it quite magical that that comes naturally to them? Sometimes they may stumble across a few words because the pronunciation might be a little complex, but generally that comes naturally to them. So do try and focus on the skills that you think are going to be most useful to you to start with, and that will definitely motivate you. So imagine the scenarios, the situation that you are going to be in when you next speak French, and decide the skills that are important to you. The reason why this booklet that we've shared with you is like a little Bible. It's our little Bible. Now, this is not something that you have to learn by heart. This is not something that you have to use every day. But ideally, I'd love for this to be your companion, your learning companion throughout your French studies. It is something that you should always have with you. It's something that you can always go back to. It's something that is really going to help you to structure your learning and motivate you as well, because you can put a name on what you've achieved. And just a quick word as well before I'll show you the booklet and explain it to you and ask you to do a little bit of work on it. In my opinion, and in all my years of more my 20 years of teaching French, what I have found is that people stop learning when they don't feel they are progressing or they're not sure where they're going. They may start to feel a little bit more comfortable with the language, but they're not really sure where they're at or where they're going. And I think that's why going back to a little booklet like that, which I think is quite easy to use, can make a real difference. It's important for you. Remember, we keep talking about it. It is a journey. Ideally, you want to adopt learning French and speaking French as something that will just be part of your lifestyle. So going back to something and kind of checking regularly is going to make a difference for you. So when you look at this booklet, it will go towards each skill. So for example, here we have listening. And then we have the different levels that Laura talked about earlier. A1 level, A2 level. So listening, basic level A1, entry level. I can understand basic greetings and use phrases such as hello, good morning, excuse me, sorry, and thank you. Are you working towards it? Have you achieved it now? When you feel that perhaps you've achieved all of that, lots of little ticks in the boxes, you can go, okay, so where is my next step? I can understand simple phrases, questions, and information relating to basic personal needs, such as shopping, eating out, going to the doctors. What's great about this little booklet is that it can not only motivate you to tick the boxes and tell yourself that you've done it, but it also clearly shows you where your next step should be. And that's the bit that's important when you learn a foreign language. It is rather disheartening to keep learning without really understanding where you're at. So that will help you. But you may also not be really sure what the next step should be. And that will help you, because professionals are telling you, you don't have to second guess that. Professionals are telling you that if you can now do, I can understand short, simple instructions and direction given in clear, slow speech, you know that the next step is, I can understand basic information about people, their family, homework, and hobbies. Great, let me work on this. That is why, to me, this little booklet should truly be your learning companion. We also use it a lot with people who are fairly proficient in French. So they come to us and say, I think I know a lot, but I need you to help me analyze what I know and where I should go. That's our first port of call, our little booklet. You see, so here we're in the listening, and then you go to B1, B2. So if you read what the booklet says, you'll see how you're going up a level, up a level, up a level. Small steps, but ideal to show you the progression that you should work towards. And by the way, guys, it doesn't mean that you have to do all of them, okay? If it says, for example, when you get to like B1, B2 level in things such as spoken production, it will say things like, you should be able to do an entire presentation in French to an audience at work in a topic that's kind of related to your industry. You may look at that and go, I don't want to work with French. This is not for me. Great. You can use it or interpret it in a different way. It could be about describing what your work was like. It could be describing what your holidays have been. You know, it doesn't have to be professional. What that booklet is showing you is the situation in which you will be and the skills that you will need to have acquired. So all of it is a description of every single skill. So the 5 skills that we've spoken about and all the different levels. What I would love for you to do now is do your own personal homework on it. And first of all, would you be keen to share what skills you would ideally like to focus on? Reading, writing, listening, spoken production, or interaction. Whether you are experienced at learning and speaking French or you are very new to it, do you have skills that you feel will be more useful to you in the short term to start with? Just checking the... Ooh. Sorry about that. Anyone wants to share? Let me, oh, there we go, the chat. B2, oh, wow, Usha, B2, well done. I like driven people. And Lynn said, short term, I need to work on all 4 skills to obtain my B1 DEL. You see, brilliant. So Lynn wants to take an exam. Am I right, Lynn, to think that you want to obtain the French nationality? Is that right? Yeah, okay. So indeed, in order to do the test, then there are certain skills that you need to work on, which could be completely different to someone who just wants to go out and live in France without taking the exam. So for that, you need 2 things. You need to use the booklet, but also you need to look at the exam requirements. You'll get there. I don't think it is that complicated, but you do need a solid B1. We have a student who's just done it, and she said that it was much easier than she expected it to be in most skills. But she said that the fact that it was easier than she thought it was going to be kind of threw her a little bit. She pushed herself to a B2. She's been studying here really hard, and then thought, oh, it's easier than I thought. But yeah, B1, a good B1 level. No, it's definitely not so bad. So Usha, I love it. So you want to reach B2, and so spoken production and interaction are right for you. I would definitely, having spoken to you personally, I would definitely agree on that. You know, you want to interact with your son's family, with your being able to understand your granddaughter because she'll be brought up bilingually. Spoken production and interaction are absolutely going to be key for you, and absolutely amazing if you want to reach a B2 level, because that is some level. So well done. So Lynn, you said, looking at your booklet, I feel I'm a low level B1. Okay. This is something that I was going to cover later, but whilst we're on that topic, let's talk about it now. Lynn, have you ever actually done a formal test to find out? Well, I think you should. We can actually help you with that. We run online tests that our students can do. So we do two things. We do consultations and informal learning assessments with our students where we use this booklet. So it's a guide of where we feel there may be, but then we put them through an online test, which lasts about 25 minutes. And you answer a series of questions, and then it tells you exactly at the end where you're at. And it's really, really quite good as well. We don't mark that test, by the way. We want it to be impartial. So it's done by a company in France we partner with. You might want to do that. You might want to do that. The Chloe test, yeah, we know the Chloe test. We do CPFs as well. Let us know what you get with the Chloe test, but it will be really interesting. Take the result, Lynn, with a little bit of a pinch of salt. This is the Chloe test or the Piplet test, which we use, are all an indication of your overall language skills. The test for French nationality is slightly different. And that's why I think that when you are working towards an exam, you should work with someone who knows that exam. Doing the level test and doing the analysis and looking at the booklet should be the groundwork. And then the program that you do should be based on what the exam requirements actually are. Because as we all know, there's a huge difference between speaking a foreign language and actually passing a language exam. So Usha said, I'm so pleased I'm not doing this for a test examination. I really want to have fun. Yeah, absolutely. You know, absolutely. And so for you, you see, that's the thing. That's a really good point, because today we're talking about language goals. And for you, Usha, it's like, there's no pressure. You do what you want, how you want it. But the reason why I think what we've spoken about today will be relevant to you is just so you keep on track. Because when there isn't, I mean, you have a great reason with your granddaughter for wanting to do it. But a lot of people, when there isn't, you know, a huge carrot at the end or something they absolutely have to do, such as Lynn and French nationality, you know, there's no two ways around it. You want French nationality, you have to take the exam. As for you, like, you could just have 6 months of lesson and go, well, you know, I know enough for my pushing, you know, the push chair, I'll be okay. And that's why I think that all we've spoken about today is great, because it should be a really good motivating factor for you. So what I wanted to show you, let me show you this as well. Not that. Let's see. Here. See, this is one of our customers' language program. So once she's had, so some of our students have a one-on-one consultation, when we do an informal but thorough analysis with one of our language coaches to figure out where this person is, where this person wants to go, and then we give really good guidance on what should happen in the language program. Other students decide on top of that to have an online, slightly more formal assessment. Then we put a language program together such as this one. And that's what I mean by a roadmap. And this happens whether people learn with us in groups or one-on-one. So once all of this has been analysed, you can decide on the linguistic objective of the student, okay? So you see this lady, she wants to focus on listening skills, reading skills, spoken production. And
can I just interrupt you a minute, Natalie?
Sure.
We're still seeing your booklet.
Oh, sorry about this. Right, let me just stop share. And let me try and share again. So how about now? No? This is really odd. Right, I'm going to do one participant. Okay, share screen. Oh, I think we're there. So share screen. How about now? Brilliant. Sorry, I'm definitely not a Zoom expert. So here is a lovely lady called Liz who has had encounters with the French language before several times. I think she did a course years and years ago. She's gone to France a little bit. She learned a little bit at school, but now she's decided that this is something that she's really going to do. So we've done a consultation with her. We didn't feel that she needed to do the test because her knowledge was too basic. And so we looked at the booklet and worked on this and asked her the skills she wanted to work on. Then we put that language program together. So this is, again, something that we do with students, whether they learn one-to-one or groups. So as you can see, she talked about listening, reading, spoken production, and writing skills. You will note that there's no spoken interaction here. That's because she said, I'm not really going to, like, this is a 6-month program. And she said, for the next 6 months, I'm not really going to be interacting with anyone. I really want you to give me a solid grounding on all the other skills. So we've listed the things that we believe she should focus on now per skill, give examples, okay? Then we look at the topics that we are going to cover with her, and then how we are going to formally, largely informally assess her throughout the next 6 months. That's what our little Vici roadmap looks like. Yours could be different. It depends how you like to work, but this is how we organize the programs for our students. What's great about this is you know what you're going to learn, you know the topic that we're going to cover, but it isn't a really heavy and detailed document that you're unlikely to ever read or where you get a little lost. It's condensed, it's compact, but it's got all the right information so you know exactly where you are going and what you'll be studying in the next 6 months. Does that make sense? Yeah. So what I wanted to say is on Sunday, which I believe is, I'm just checking, day 7, Sunday is going to be very much a session based on what we call a customized learning assessment. So we are basically going to have hot seats. You are very welcome to join us and live tell us where you are, where you want to be, and we'll just talk about you only for 5-10 minutes, depending on how many people are asking, and you'll be on the hot seat, and we will try as much as we can in the short space of time we have to tell you exactly what you should focus on, to tell you, we'll go back to everything that we will have covered this week, the personality and color, the type of learner that you are, everything, okay? all the different resources that you need to put in your blend. And then we will look at examples of language programs like that. So this is happening on Sunday, by the way, which gives you, it's only Wednesday today, isn't it? Which gives you time to go over the little booklet. You could have very general questions, such as, I'm here, I want to go there, what do you think I should do? Or you should say, I decided that I want to focus on that area. What resources do you think I should use? I am this type of learner. What do you think I should do? What resources should I use? So, does that make sense? And do you have any questions on the 3 pillars, i.e. the levels, the skills within those levels, and the roadmap? I'm just checking on questions. Oh, that's okay, Lynn. Definitely, you'll get the recording. I send it every day. I tell you what, we've got 10 minutes left. Laura, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Not in particular, but as I said, I think it's important to stress what Natalie and I have said, that again, the goal isn't to get to 100% of language. It isn't to get necessarily to the C2 level. So I see that both Lynn and Usha, you've really thought already about what you would like to achieve. Obviously, Lynn is a bit different because you'd have the exam. And for Usha, am I pronouncing your name right? Yes. Good, excellent. Usha as well. So I see you've said long term you want to get to a B2 level, which is great, like really ambitious. I love it. But I think it's important to always, while you have the idea of what you want to get to, it's very important to be looking at the booklet and thinking about what you need to do next as well. So rather than, you know, it's good to have sort of I'm a very visual learner, so I have my booklet. I'm using it for Spanish as well, so I highlight really where I am at the moment, so I know. Then I go through and I highlight where I want to be. But in between that, it's very important to know the next steps to take and to not, you know, otherwise you can get a little bit overwhelmed. It can be a lot. So it is really important to sort of look at the specific steps that you need to be taking next, whether that's with guidance from an expert such as us or on your own. But yeah, just to make sure that you know, like Natalie said with her mountain, that you don't just see the top of the mountain, you need to know which path you're going to take before you get there as well. So just to be aware of that, to make sure you really are looking in the detail as well.
And I love that Lynn says that, Usha, you just reminded Lynn that she'll potentially have to speak to grandchildren at some point. I hope you do.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. Excellent. Oh, a timeline of verb tenses.
Do you mean in terms of when you use what tense and when?
Yeah, for my students, I find that they react really well when they can visualize it on a timeline. Now, the past, the future, and the tense is being used with the little lines and the little things for continuous, etc. I have searched high and low for one in French, and I cannot find one. And I need one.
Well, let me, I don't have one myself.
Definitely something we can.
Not being a visual learner, that doesn't speak to me very well. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not
the idea.
You know, but I know exactly what you mean, because I remember learning English at school and the teacher was using one. If I'll ask the team, I've got tons of French resources everywhere, but I'll ask the team. And I just want to say that what Laura said is really, it's really great. It's amazing to set yourself a high target. What's also brilliant is to have steps and tick and say, I've achieved this, I've achieved this, I've achieved that. Not only you know where you're going, but it keeps you motivated as well. And you need to celebrate, by the way. So you're allowed to go to a French restaurant and have an expensive bottle of red wine or any other wine every time that you reach that step. But to me, those 3 pillars, like level, skills, and roadmap, are really crucial to help you navigate around your French learning without getting lost. Because if you get lost, undoubtedly, you lose the motivation. I'll tell you what, I'm just checking the time. if that's okay with you, I'll let you have a little chat, and I'm going to see if my colleague Cecile is available to have a chat with you, because I was chatting to her about our session today. She said something that I thought was hugely relevant about her past experience of working in a different company, where it was very much about the entertainment element of learning the foreign language, and how she felt things were different when she came here. And we still wanted our students to have a great time, but we put real structure into their learning. She said to me, if you've got a few minutes left, I'd love to come and chat to your participant about it. So what I'm going to do, if that's okay, I'm going to stop the share so you should all see each other. And I'm just going to go and see if she's available for a minute. Bear with me.
Laura.
Yes?
Are you a Gemini by any chance?
Am I a Gemini? Why do you say that?
Because you speak quite fast.
Oh, I speak quickly. No, I'm a Taurus. Does that?
Oh, so am I. But I'm on the cusp. I'm on the cusp of Taurus with Gemini. So when I'm nervous, I can really, really, really go really fast, and people just can't keep up with me.
I know, I get told that quite a lot. Sometimes, especially in teaching, I have to remember to slow it down. I think I was teaching in university before, and I had the first year students, and then I would arrive and I was speaking English, and sometimes some of them would look a little bit, oh, there's a real English person that's speaking to me very quickly.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself as well.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was a Gemini trait.
Yeah, Gemini. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and they're quick thinkers as well. So your brain thinks so quickly. You just want to get it all out there.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm the 6th of May, so I don't think I'm on the cusp.
No, I'm the 19th, so I'm definitely on the cusp.
Oh, yeah, on the out and the end cusp. I see. Ah, we have Cecile.
Hello. So, hi everyone. So I just want to introduce you to Cecile. Cecile is one of our French coaches. So I've just told our lovely participants to today's French masterclass. We talked about, as you know, levels and skills and roadmaps, and we showed language programs, and we showed the booklet of the European Framework for Languages. And I said that I mentioned to you yesterday what we were going to talk about, and you came up with this great idea of the difference between the company you worked at before, where it was all about the entertainment element of learning the foreign language, and then you came here where we still want people to have a great time, but we're pretty kind of, needs to be structured, needs to be like that, you need to understand this, da-da-da. And I said that you had like great insights on this, which I thought would be really useful to share.
Okay, so shall I introduce myself?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hello, my name is Cecile. I have lived in the UK for quite some time now. I won't say the exact number. And I was dissuaded to become a teacher when I was very young, and therefore went the business route. Had a career, stopped my career to have my son. And eventually, always in the background was always teaching languages. So I worked and experienced various settings as well as various methods. In other words, I've worked in schools, I've had a license of a very formatted methodology. And, all methods or all ways, approaches to language teaching and journeys had their pros and their cons. But what I love at Vichy is that we do structure yet fun, structure yet spontaneity. It's all about creativity, and also it's an exchange. Languages are about exchanging, so it has got to work for the person receiving that information and the teacher. So this is where I think Vichy allows us to be, use a very elaborate way of teaching languages, which the European framework does, and it gives us great landmarks, but we can also, have great fun. And also the other thing that I particularly like is the fact that we can tailor our programs to suit each of our learners and the way their learning style. And this is very new, because normally, you know, you have a methodology, and that methodology is just applied like a blanket. Whereas here we use some methodology, but we also take into consideration who it is we are teaching, and how they like to learn best. And I can't express this. I just love it so much, because it is the only way really to learn. And I've experienced the other methodologies. I mean, a very rigid structure tends to end up in, sorry, Lando is saying hello, he agrees with me, you see.
Labrador wants to take part, obviously feels a little bit ignored right now.
Yeah, so following like a curriculum, as in a school, can be great, but eventually it might be too rigid and lead to demotivation. And equally, having a lot of fun or being less structured means that at some point you might not feel that you're progressing, and therefore we have to have a bit of both in order to be successful. And in my opinion, this is why Vichy is so successful at supporting our clients' language journeys. And yes,
thank you.
That's about it, really.
Thank you. I think it really sums it up. You know, there are loads of methodologies out there, and people who pretend to have found the magic pill for you to learn a foreign language are liars, for want of a better word. However, there is a way of looking at, you know, the student as a whole. We talk about being student-centered, and that's why, you know, you talked about looking at, you know, the personalization of the program. That was a huge part of what we covered in day 1 and day 2. And obviously today we talked about the entire path to make sure that what you do is motivating, is structured, is planned, that you don't lose your way whilst learning. And so you are always engaged with, you know, the next thing, but also you're engaged, but you're also very satisfied about where you are, because you feel you're making progress.
Exactly.
Thank you, Cécile.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn. That's very kind of you. It is spot on 1 o'clock here in the UK. So that is the end of day 3 masterclass. Happy to stay a little bit longer if you have any questions at all. All good? Okay, well, we will see you tomorrow. And tomorrow I will be presenting with my colleague Lana. Tomorrow it will be about ways of living the language. So I very much look forward to seeing you then. And thank you for being here today. Merci. Bonne fin de journée. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you. These are really interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome.